And in Arizona, oh, it's a big day for counselor cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell. Opening statement starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and there is a 30-minute delay. So as soon as that 30 minutes is up, you're going to see it all here live. And that is, of course, our top story this morning. Lori Vallow representing herself in her trial after being charged with conspiracy to commit murder in the death of course, her husband, Charles Vallow. Now, mostly male jury has been seated in this one with 13 men. Wow, it's a lot of men, and 3 women. Only 3. Now, just days before the start of her trial, Daybell sat down with True Crime Arizona, revealing why she decided to represent herself.
Obviously, being pro per is not an easy job. I'm not an attorney. I don't have training to be an attorney. There's something that I figured out when I got to this jail. You know, this experience has been 5 years running. I came here with the intention of having a speedy trial, right? I wanted to, these charges came first, right? So they're like 5 years old. So I, first talked to the attorneys. I was like, they've had 5 years, the prosecutors, to put their case together, and I really want to go to trial. Like, we need to go.
So how will Lori do giving her opening statement? We can't wait for this. How about you? I can't wait to bring in this power panel we have assembled this morning. Let's welcome them all. In the studio with me, I have Charles Middlestat and Michael Sterling, and joining us remotely, Tommy Pope. Good morning to you all. Michael, let me begin with you here, please. The opening statements. Lori needs some tips as the defense attorney. What does she need to do today?
Well, she needs to do a lot. I find it very interesting. She goes from legally incompetent to staying trial to now she's got trial experience and she's a skilled criminal defense attorney. But what she needs to do is tell a very specific narrative, right? Make sure she has a theme and a theory and lay it out very clearly for the jurors, right? If she's done any studying, as she said she has, she understands what a theory is, what a theme is. It is a narrative that it is a overall picture that allows a jury to sort of follow your story. And so she needs to lay it out very clearly, have a very identifiable theme, a very identifiable theory, and say, this is why I should not be convicted, and this is what the evidence is going to show you.
Right. Well said, Michael. So that interview with True Crime Arizona, she talked about some of the biggest challenges she thinks she's going to have during this case. Let's all take a look together at that.
The biggest challenge for me in this trial will be the logistics. I want to be able to go and talk to the people who have stood up and lied about me. I get to face them face to face. I think that's important.
Now, she also said in this same interview that she's been wrongfully convicted of the 3 other homicides, but that's beside the point. Let's focus on the instant homicide with Charles Vallow. Tommy Pope, you prosecuted one of the most famous cases in America of a bad mom, the Susan Smith case. You're responsible for putting that woman behind bars, and she's still there to this day. You know what it's like to be in front of the cameras, the pressure. You're a state lawmaker. Now you get it. The media is swirling this morning. What are the stakes like for the prosecution in this one?
You and I have talked about it before in a number of cases, that their job's to stay focused. And it's extremely difficult when you have a defendant representing themselves, because the judge normally gives the defendant wide latitude. You can tell this is her additional 15 minutes of fame. I think she's enjoyed it. I watched the Arizona video you were talking about, and I wonder where they get curling irons in prison, because she is all primed up and ready to go. And I think in her opening, I think in the case, I think in cross-examining witnesses, one, you're not going to have the structure that the guys with you or I would object to if you got outside, so that's going to be more difficult. So again, the prosecutors just got to focus and hope she kind of runs amok and that the jury takes that in. We always talk about not being able to see the jury when we're watching sometimes, and I was a juror watcher, always wondering, and I was wrong about 50% of the time, but reading their faces and trying to determine how they're taking her can kind of structure, how far they go and kind of snapping back even at her in the courtroom.
Sure. Great points, Tommy. You mentioned her hair, and we've got a lot of questions about this, so I feel like it's an appropriate time to bring it up. We looked into this. Apparently, she sleeps with wet towels. She was a hairstylist before she became locked up, and so she wraps her hair to get those pretty curls. And apparently, in Arizona, they can buy makeup at the commissary. So every state is unique, and apparently she can buy some makeup there. So when we see her made up in some of these interviews, apparently she can choose some lipstick there when she needs it. So and for this trial, I expect her to be, fully, dressed and looking her best. And we know there's a lot of men on that jury. Charles Middlestead, let me bring you in on that point. So 13 men. We know one of the themes in her trial in Idaho was manipulation, that she was using sex to manipulate Chad Daybell. And do you expect her to do some manipulating with the jury in this one?
I certainly anticipate that she thinks she's going to be able to. I mean, listen, that certainly works in her favor. It gives her an opportunity to exercise what I'm certain she views as her own charm and to try to manipulate these men. I mean, manipulation is something that clearly somebody with her personality profile is very adept at. And so I assume she's going to go with her strengths. I don't know if she had a jury consultant involved in the selection of this jury or not, but it seems to bode in her favor.
Right. You would hope she would. But you have to wonder, Michael, I mean, you know how she just thinks she knows best. I wonder if she would even listen. What do you think?
Well, I believe she had a counsel advisor, so she has actually a barred attorney sitting next to her giving her some advice. At least she has that. I don't think she had a jury consultant, but I imagine that the lawyer who was sitting next to her were telling her, here are certain things you need to look for in jurors, and, because it's really not juror selection, it's really juror deselection. You're trying to make sure you get people who can be fair and impartial, and you don't let somebody on a juror who's got a predetermined mindset about your guilt or innocence.
Right, exactly. Weed those people out. I have a post I want to share with you all from Kay Woodcock. This lovely woman has been through so much, as you all know. This is Charles Vallow's sister, and she's also the grandmother of little JJ Vallow. If we remember, Charles adopted JJ. He belonged to another relative who was unable to take care of him, and so Lori and Charles took him in. And take a look at this. She's saying, justice for Charles Vallow finally begins tomorrow. Been a long, tumultuous journey. My sweet brother, watching from heaven, we pray for earthly justice as it's the best we can hope for. We love and miss you lots. Tommy Pope, what would you be saying to Kay Woodcock if you're the prosecutor on this as she's arrived in Arizona to watch this trial?
I would tell her to focus on the evidence, try not to focus on the defendant's antics, because it's torturous for the victims. I always explained on like death penalty cases, it becomes all about the defendant, and you rarely hear about the victim, and it's going to be amplified with her representing herself. I mean, the video you're showing now, how much she enjoys being there. She's really got nothing to lose. She's having fun being in the camera's eye, and you can't let that part torture you, because it will. We talked about David Smith, as hard as it is every 2 years going to parole hearings. If she got out and disappeared, it'd be good. But if Susan, was on social media or on reality TV within the 3 months, it would be a worse torture. And so it's kind of the same thing for her, that you got to just put aside the fact that Lori is enjoying the time of her life and being the center of attention.
Yeah, she really is. There's some similarities between Lori and Susan Smith, aren't there, Tommy? Thank you for that. Charles, let me go to you, please, on the prosecution's evidence against her. So we know with this case, we have a couple interesting factors at play. The man who killed Charles Vallow is Lori's brother, her protector, Alex Cox, who is also dead. So we have interviews, we have statements, but we don't have him as a joined co-defendant, although they call him an unindicted co-conspirator in all of the pleadings. And then we also have her not present at the home. She was driving through Burger King at the time that the shooting happened. How do you think these factors of her not being present and not getting her hands dirty are going to come in here?
Well, the interesting thing about this particular case is that actually none of the witnesses are alive, right? So you,
Right.
Tylee, JJ, Alex, Charles, the decedent, they're all not present. And so this case is largely going to be tried on, I assume, exceptions that will allow their prior statements to come in the form of body camera footage and other statements, including statements that she may have made at some point. So it's really a case that's sort of being tried from many graves, and it puts the prosecution at a disadvantage. This is, frankly, the most defensible of all our cases. And so, you know, it's a very, very interesting dynamic. The fact that she was not there, again, with regard to the prosecution's theory that she was a co-conspirator and this was premeditated. We'll sort of have to see how they kind of weave that together and what sort of evidence exists to further that theory on the prosecution's part. But obviously we haven't seen that yet, but that'll be very, very interesting to see what that looks like.
Excellent points, Charles. Boy, I got chills. I loved how you said this is being tried from many graves, many people's graves. It's true. You're exactly right. And you hit on something really big. Of all the cases, you're right. This is the most defensible one. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. This is the one case where you actually have a bona fide self-defense claim, as opposed to the other cases. And the fact that this one is going last is kind of, to Attorney Pope's point, you don't really have anything to lose, right? She's already going to spend the rest of her life in prison, unless by some miracle it's overturned on appeal. But there's really nothing for her to lose. And it is a defensible case, but you don't have any witnesses, right? So it's going to be interesting just to see how the evidence plays out, how the prosecution is able to present their evidence, how Lori, if she does put on a case in chief, is able to present some of the body cam footage that might be helpful to her case. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. And also, despite the fact that she's been in the public's eye for so long and people know so much about her, the question becomes, it kind of reminds you of when OJ had the case in Las Vegas, right? Because he had been in the public's eye for so long and people knew so much about him, you get jurors who say, yes, I can set aside any pre-existing notions I might have. But the question becomes, how much does that play into this case?
Right, that's a great point.